Throughout the Demon Slayer's story, Tanjiro is always walking on a fine line between life and death, and there are so many moments where a single mistake would have ended it all. But what if he got a second chance to do it all again, with the foresight and the strength of his future self? In today's video, I'll be exploring an alternate timeline where Tanjiro's reborn with all his memories and powers. Our story begins during the Sunrise Countdown. Nearly all the Demon Slayers have been wiped out, with only Tanjiro and a couple of Hashira directly engaging Muzan. Still, they're making progress, and it takes one final trick from the Demon King to turn the tables. Muzan injects all of his blood into Tanjiro, creating the new Demon King with an immunity to the sun and the full knowledge of how to use sun breathing. It's game over for humanity at this point, and while Kanao and Nezuko managed to bring Tanjiro back to his senses in the original timeline, this time they fail. As Tanjiro's consciousness fades, he sees his body morphing uncontrollably, attacking his allies and the ones he loved the most. Those powerful feelings of heartbreak and regret trigger something within Tanjiro, and while his life force fades in this reality, his soul is thrown back in time. When Tanjiro wakes up, he's back in his childhood home. At first, he thinks he's dreaming, but as the hours pass by, he realizes that this can't possibly be a fantasy. In this new life, Tanjiro doesn't waste a single moment. He already knows how everything ends, and he's desperate to prevent all that suffering and grief. By the time most children his age are still learning ordinary chores, Tanjiro is already training before dawn. He asks his father to teach him the Hinokami Kagura, and uses that as an excuse to relentlessly train the forms of sun breathing. His precision's almost unnatural as he refines each stance and each breath. His father watches in confusion, sensing that something about his son has changed, but never fully understanding what he's seeing. Tanjiro masters total concentration breathing years earlier than he should have, and unlike in his first life, he doesn't struggle blindly through inherited memories. By the age of 10, Tanjiro can already flow through the full sequence of all 13 forms and activate the Demon Slayer mark at will. In secret, Tanjiro has already become the most dangerous human alive, but for all his power, there are some things that still hurt exactly the same. When his father falls ill, Tanjiro feels the weight of grief even harder than the first time. After his father passes, Tanjiro needs to decide. Does he try to save his family from Muzan? Even with his newfound strength, Tanjiro wouldn't be a match for the Demon King one-on-one, and anyway, he doesn't even have a sword at this point. But he can't just not try, so Tanjiro gets his family to go to the village that night. However, Muzan still tracks them down. While Tanjiro rests at Saburo's house during the snowstorm, the family is attacked and Nezuko is transformed into a demon. Just as before, Giyu Tomioka appears on the snowy mountain path, but instead of finding a terrified, helpless boy, he finds a calm and collected child who acts like an adult. Tanjiro deflects Giyu's attacks with skill that should be impossible for someone his age, and in that moment, the Water Hashira realizes he's looking at something he can't explain. From there, events begin to shift rapidly, and Tanjiro reaches Urokodaki as someone who already understands the path ahead. His training is no longer about building a foundation. Instead, he focuses on sharpening the techniques he already has. By the time the final selection arrives, Tanjiro's no longer even remotely on the level of the other candidates. Instead of surviving by chance and desperation, Tanjiro tracks the hand demon by scent and ends the fight almost instantly. A single form of Hinokami Kagura is enough to cut through the demon cleanly, and by dawn, the mountain is eerily calm. The surviving candidates are confused because what should have been a brutal week of terror turns into a night strangely lacking in bloodshed. Tanjiro hunted down every single demon on Mount Fujikasane, and his feat earned him a meeting with Kaguya Ubuyashiki. Unlike everyone else, Kaguya has the insight to understand that this boy standing before him is not simply talented. Tanjiro tells him everything about the future, the upper moons, the infinity castle, and the sunrise countdown. Kaguya listens in silence, and his foresight lets him understand the dangerous truth at the center of it all. Knowing the future is powerful. Changing it recklessly could create a timeline even Tanjiro can no longer navigate. So, the two of them begin planning in secret. There's no Hashira meeting this time to discuss whether Tanjiro can work with Nezuko, and he's fast-tracked through the core with the freedom to operate outside the normal structure. Tanjiro knows there's one move more urgent than any other, so he travels to Asakusa first, seeking out Tamayo and telling her about the path to the anti-Muzan drug. Thanks to Kaguya sending word ahead, Tamayo accepts Tanjiro's advice, and from that night onward, the drug's development begins months ahead of schedule. When Tanjiro catches Muzan's scent on the streets, the rage nearly overwhelms him, but he also understands something far more important. Muzan doesn't know what he knows. That advantage is more valuable than any reckless attack. Tanjiro still orchestrates his encounter with the Demon King, but doesn't engage Muzan or reveal his true strength. With Tamayo now working ahead of time and Nezuko's blood being studied earlier, the anti-Muzan strategy begins forming long before anyone else in the Corps even realizes the final battle is approaching. From there, the early missions look less like a normal journey because Tanjiro is simply doing them to preserve the timeline he knows. At the drum house, Tanjiro tears through Kyogai's shifting rooms with complete control, using the transparent world to read the demon's attacks before they fully unfold. Mount Natagumo changes even more drastically, as Tanjiro arrives already knowing every blood demon art, every trap in the forest, and every weakness in the Spider family's coordination. Rui never gets the chance to dominate the battlefield the way he originally did, and Nezuko is never forced into the same desperate struggle. But that creates a new complication, because without being pushed to the brink of death, Nezuko's blood demon art doesn't emerge. Tanjiro recognizes immediately that this missing piece will matter later, and he understands the margin for error is much smaller than before. Tanjiro's next big decision comes on the Mugen train, as he knows that with his current strength, he could annihilate Enmu quickly and wait in full condition for Akaza's arrival. He knows he could protect Rengoku, but he also remembers Kaguya's warning. If Akaza dies too early, Muzan will know that the Demon Slayer Corps is much stronger than he expected, and the Demon King will stop behaving predictably. He may change targets, go into hiding, or strike somewhere that Tanjiro has not prepared for. The Swordsmith village could be destroyed before its defenders are ready, and the war could become chaos. So, once again, Tanjiro accepts a compromise that tears at him. When Akaza appears, Tanjiro deliberately avoids using the selfless state and watches Rengoku fight and take immeasurable damage from the demon. Tanjiro calculates every angle and only steps in at the final possible moment. Just as Akaza prepares the decisive blow, Tanjiro cuts off both of the Upper Moon's arms in a single motion, forcing him to retreat with the dawn approaching. Rengoku is severely wounded, probably to a point where he can never fully recover, but he's alive. The other Hashira begin to feel that something's changing around Tanjiro, even if they cannot yet name it. The Entertainment District and Swordsmith Village arcs proceed just like they did in the original timeline, and after Gyoko and Hantengu are defeated, the biggest turning point of all finally arrives. Nezuko steps into sunlight and doesn't burn. Even though Tanjiro knew this moment was coming, seeing it with his own eyes still hits him harder than anything else. Nezuko's sun resistance confirms that the anti-Muzan drug derived from her blood will still work, and the timeline remains intact despite his changes. By the time the Hashira training arc begins, Tanjiro stops acting like a lone force and pushes the Corps into a level of preparation they've never reached in the original timeline. Demon Slayer mark activation is no longer treated as a miraculous accident. The transparent world and the selfless state are pursued deliberately, and Tanjiro moves from Hashira to Hashira, training beside them and forcing resonance. By the time the training concludes and everyone is pulled into the Infinity Castle, every elite member of the Corps is stronger, more coordinated, and more prepared than they were in the original timeline. The Demon Slayers are not scattered and confused in this timeline. Tanjiro's already told the Hashira what kinds of monsters they can expect, and the swordsmen work in groups to take down the Upper Moons. Akaza faces Tanjiro and Rengoku together, and the battle ends far faster than it should against two marked warriors who've mastered techniques that make them unreadable to his compass needle. Elsewhere, the other battles also shift in the Demon Slayer's favor because they're no longer stumbling into the unknown. And at the center of it all stands Muzan, weakened by Tamayo's drug and surrounded by the surviving Hashira. He's forced into a final confrontation against a Tanjiro who's already lived through the nightmare once before, and the Demon King begins to understand that something has gone terribly wrong for him. Just like in the original timeline, Muzan tries making Tanjiro the new Demon King when he realizes it's a losing battle, but this is when Tanjiro performs the 13th form. All 12 vital organs are struck in one continuous, merciless sequence. Sun breathing cuts through Muzan's regeneration with a level of control Tanjiro never achieved in his first life, and with the drug taking effect, the Demon King finally reaches the end of the road. For the first and last time, Muzan is erased completely. 3 months later, Tanjiro stands on the mountain where everything once began, but this time, the view is different. He couldn't save the rest of his family, but Rengoku's alive, Tengen still has both arms, and a vast majority of the Demon Slayer Corps survived the final battle. Tanjiro knows better than anyone that no second chance can erase every scar, but when he looks at the sunrise now, he sees something he was denied the first time around. A world where the people he loves are still here to witness it. If you liked this video, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another Demon Slayer fan theory.